All right, Guru Nation, we are live with the one and only Dr. Daniel Fox and Brad Hightower. I mean, this is like something that I can't believe we haven't done until now. Hopefully, it becomes much more regular. And we've just been talking in the green room a little bit. And by the way, put your comments, guys. All right, I had to announce before we get into anything, okay? I have to announce like today's day one of my Veeva sponsorship. Viva's here to take over the industry in a good way. I've been following Viva since 2019, 2018, maybe. Um, they are site focused. They're giving out Viva's Site Vault for free. Okay, owned by sites, loved by sponsors. Viva's already been, just give people like a 30-second cliff notes. Viva's been a household name for sponsors since before I even probably got into this industry. They're not a household name for sites. They're doing things to empower sites. They're giving you free stuff. They don't need anything out of it. They're a multi-billion-dollar company, $44 billion market cap. At least at its peak. It's probably like 27 now, 28. Who knows? Everyone's getting hammered. But that's not what's important. What's important is they can afford to do this because they know that sponsors like tools that sites like. And they know that sites don't care, mostly because they don't need another platform. That's the last thing sites need. So here you have a free e-reg, which is going to passively integrate with all the 400 plus sponsors already using Veeva. So if you're sick of your monitor asking you for the latest GCP of sub-I number 4, they don't need to ask you anymore. It's already there if you're maintaining your Veeva e-reg site vault. Not only that, you'll hear me talk a lot about Veeva now these next few months. It's biz dev. When you sign up for Site Vault for free, it's free. They're not trying to upsell you anything either. It's free. You get added to a list of sites that 400 plus sponsors already know about and use. All right. And Rod, Creo, yes, we're still using Creo for eSource. Veeva doesn't do eSource yet. We're still using Creo for eSource and CTMS. Veeva doesn't do CTMS yet. But it's an additional tool for eReg. And it passively integrates with sponsors. So you don't even need to give them external access. So just wanted to get that out of the way. Veeva, thank you. I got my hat. I got my Veeva hat. I'm going to put it on. But what a great live stream, Brad, Dr. Fox.
They swagged you up, Viva.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Like I asked for like everything they had on their website, and they sent me what the supply shortage of what they had, but they're going to send me more stuff soon. So thank you guys for coming on.
You know, I was a Veeva super user back in the client days or the sponsor days. And I'll have to agree with you, Dan. I don't have my swag. Veeva, you can send me whatever you want. But no, in all sincerity, over at SCRS, Veeva was the only one who gave the swag of donating to nonprofits. So they had these cool tubes, and they give you coins, and you get to choose what nonprofits they're going to donate to. They didn't give you swag. Instead, what they ended up doing was they actually helped to take care of their country. They really do care. So that's just my plug. So I do have high respects for that company.
Yeah, I wouldn't just accept any sponsor either. Like I've only had one official sponsor my entire existence of doing this. The last one was Intralinks. We're still using it. It was our TMF system for my CRO and site network. But you know, Veeva, they're up there, and they're ones that get it, and they're ones that can see and play the long game. See, they're not like these VC companies where they're just burning their investors' money and trying to get sites, you know, nickel and dime here and there. They're playing the long game. They're willing to be patient. And ultimately, that's, I think it's a strategy that's going to win out. Of course, it comes down to the sites. People like you, Brad, people like me, people like you, Dr. Fox. Are you actually going to use the tech or not? Remains to be seen, but they understand this at least.
Yeah, I like their strategy for sure in all the different companies I've talked to. So I'm with you. I mean, I'm taking them on as a sponsor as well. So I think I'm like you. I wouldn't just necessarily sell out to anybody throwing money at us, you know. So I think it's cool to at least start to get some, you know, I don't know, consensus that maybe there's some solutions out there we all like and we can all start leaning into, and as sites make a difference, you know, like really start to put some pressure on the industry to use the things that we think are good, because a lot of stuff sucks, and it's up to us to
Yeah.
help guide that.
Mhm.
So as I put on my hat, okay, everybody knows you guys already, but so I'm not gonna do like long intros. I want you guys to explain yourselves and like your vision for what you're contributing to research in as few words as possible. We'll start with Dr. Fox.
What do I want to contribute to research? I want everyone who's living and breathing on this world to have the right to perform research as a patient, as a site, as a physician, because I think that COVID showed us the most of all that clinical research is our right. It's our way to make sure that our globe and how we run things keeps running the way it is. So, access, lots of access.
Yeah, I like it. I think very simply put, I mean, my goal is to make it easy for physicians to participate in research. It shouldn't be, sort of all done in academic centers. It shouldn't all be held by hospitals. I think it should be done more in the community, and all physicians should have the ability to participate. And it shouldn't be a huge pain in the ass or, a financial loss for them to do that. So that's really my whole mission, is to make it easy for physicians to offer trials to their patients.
What do you guys think? And we're going to get into the questions. You guys drop your questions. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. What do you think the biggest impediment to clinical research efficiency is right now?
I mean, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but
No,
I
let's
think there's.
do it.
I think there's like too much incentive for it to be inefficient financially, right? So if you look at what CROs do, I mean, a lot of it is unnecessary. A lot of it is, making everyone's lives more difficult than they need to be. But they're making money hand over fist because of some of these inefficiencies that they're not just leaning into, but creating in many cases. So I don't know. I mean, I don't mean for that to sound like, again, not like a conspiracy that they're purposely doing it, but at the same time, they have very little incentive to make it more efficient, when it could very well be with just cutting out some of the silliness that's done. I mean, that's just that's my hot take, I guess.
So when and how do sponsors? Oh, go ahead, Dr. Fox, because I have like follow-ups to this. We can just go on rants this whole hour.
No, that's fine. I kind of agree with Brad. I think that there's been certain artificial barriers that have been put in place for research. I mean, if you look at any other industry, finance, the financial industry is a big one. The technology is there, and even the infrastructure. We have people who have demonstrated, even in healthcare alone, we have demonstrated that when you perform research, you can do it in certain ways. But I think that if we were to perform it in the way that we need to, it would certainly be taking some dollars out of some people's pockets who have a lot of power right now. And I think, when you have financial motive, you have a disincentive to try to make things progressive.
I've noticed, I've talked to sponsors on a regular basis, and it's for us as site owners, and all three of us here are site owners. A lot of people watching site owners, but a lot of people watching are also not site owners. Probably more so are not site owners. Sites tend to blame sponsors for everything, and to some extent, yes. I mean, even the FDA is the one that holds the sponsors responsible, not CROs, not vendors. But a lot of the blame can and should be pointed at the middleman, like oftentimes it's the CROs. I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of ironic how CROs were birthed, with Dr. Gillings, who started Quintiles, which is now IQVIA, to increase efficiency. And they do deserve a lot of credit. I mean, prior to CRO existence, it was just like helter skelter sponsors just trying to find sites with a lot of academics. So CROs kind of privatized a lot of this, which opened up the opportunities for people like us to even have sites. Because before, like nobody would come to Yuma Clinical Trials. They would go to ASU, U of A, and that's it. So in many ways, the CROs kind of completed their task so well that they've built this incredible moat around themselves. And now you're right. Like maybe the incentives are not there, but I think sponsors are also starting to take control a little bit more. And at least from just the hearings I get from different sponsors, they're trying to structure different packages, like as far as how they pay the CROs. Like they'll pay if the study completes quicker. They'll pay more if the sites start up faster. But that's still not the norm. That's not the norm. But do you think we're going to see more of that, especially with tools like Veeva, which are actually empowering sponsors?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, you would think so, and especially too with all the new entrants into the market right now. I mean, it could. I think it. Even though, like, look, I'm scared as hell to have 10 new systems that I've never heard of before to work in. I also think it's going to be great for competition because it's going to open up a doorway for somebody to do it right who's not sort of stuck in that older way of thinking. They'll do whatever it takes to win business, which maybe is actually being more efficient, not just you know uh, selling more billable hours or whatever the case may be. So I mean, I'm hopeful. I complain a lot, but at the same time, I'm really hopeful about what all this craziness could potentially could bring about. Could bring about positive change.
Hmm.
And I think you had a really good point, Dan, when you talked about, CROs have their place. Before CROs entered the market, uh, we couldn't scale up the way that we did now. So as a result, you really have to give them the kudos to put the processes in place. And I do think that in the future, they're going to still have a place in this industry. I just think that maybe that place is going to shift a little bit to the point where they can focus on their strengths and maybe they can let go of some of the things that they're not necessarily doing appropriately.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the incentives have to change. I think that's like becoming clear to a lot of people that are watching this industry and in this industry, especially those that are working in the industry. There's also like, I mean, there's something here to be said about the inefficiencies. Like, it does benefit the sites as well to some extent. Don't you guys think? I mean, we
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
like to hear the studies ending soon. Like, this is the last month to start screening. Like, just personally, I don't like to hear that. Like, okay, I gotta hustle now, and we should be hustling the whole time. But let's face it, like, we really don't hustle as much as we can until we get that email that, hey, we only have a month left.
well, if it were, if it were easy to be to run clinical trials, we wouldn't exist, right? I mean, there would be no need for
Yeah.
people like us because physicians could do it. They could do it out of their offices. It'd be way easier to prop up, but it's not. So yeah, in some ways, it's hard to it's hard to point the finger because I mean, in a large part, we exist because of the inefficiencies there or the you know self-imposed difficulties, so to
The whole
speak.
concept of a rescue site, like, thank God, rescue studies have given Yuma clinical trial like a chance to get started.
Mhm.
So that's inefficiency leading to a company actually being formed.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a site's perspective, like you said, maybe the incentives have to change a little bit. We try to do, I'll call it just in time clinical administration, not just in time clinical trials. And essentially, just in time doesn't stop at startup. When we do our just in times, it's literally come in, get your patients, get your data, get out, move on to the next one. And so, we try to make it more of an assembly line. I think that we could be incentivized by productivity, not by sitting on the trials that are, kind of lingering about, but just try to get them in, get them out, and move on to the next one. And it makes for a very good business model.
Yeah, I think the sites that can get studies quickly, like the ones that have developed a reputation for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
are going to be the ones less bothered by this. But many, are just struggling to get studies. Even though this market, I mean, you guys are seeing like super busy, right? Are you guys
Yeah,
seeing the same thing?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We
there's a
call it
ton.
we call it revenge research. It's all the stuff they're trying to make up for from COVID and beyond. It's just been crazy.
Monoclonal antibodies, that's like
Yep, yep.
huge right now. I thought it was going to be mRNA platform. It seems like it's monoclonal antibody
Mhm.
platform that's number one.
Yep. I wonder if maybe the COVID vaccine kind of jaded mRNAs a little bit, kind of got politicized, and so we're moving more to the monoclonals.
Not to say there's no
So,
potential there either, though. I think that's
yeah.
gonna have a lot of potential applications, and it's gonna require more research.
Mhm.
Guys, that's at the end of the day. Uh, let us know in the comments what you guys think. Questions for Dr. Fox, questions for Brad Hightower. We were talking in the green room about social media, and I mean, it's back to increasing inefficiencies, right? I think sites that can innovate are going to do well no matter what, whether you call it virtual trials, decentralized trials, or regular trials. Like, sites need to innovate. I
Mhm.
think one of the easiest ways sites can innovate is to become the voice for their community. Especially, it's easier in smaller towns where there's, not that many voices. But I think social media is something that sites are not taking advantage of. That's like my next hire, I was telling you guys, is going to be someone I'm going to groom them to be a coordinator, but their primary role is going to be you're going to create a YouTube channel for our community. You're going to go interview teachers, principals, local business owners, patient groups, clinicians. We're just going to create a show, podcast, videos, Instagram, TikTok, and that's going to evolve into you being a pre-screener of patients, which will evolve into you actually doing the screening visits, which now guess what? You're kind of a coordinator too. And that's my next strategy here. But what do you guys think specifically with social media? I mean, we're all using this tool to build our own brands, and we see how powerful it is.
Mhm.
So why don't sites see this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, I think it's something I've struggled to wrap my head around from a patient outreach perspective, and maybe a better way to frame it is how you're saying it, like community engagement, right? Like I may be thinking too small in terms of like, okay, let's go post stuff on Facebook, try to get and drum up interest for trials. And again, maybe that might be just the wrong way to think about it. It may be more in going and engaging with the community. I think it's a way smarter idea and maybe something that I certainly haven't leaned into enough. I know that it's even just the social media we do is a very double-edged sword, right? I mean, some of the engagement is just where do you start? Like I mean, people who are making all kinds of you know saying terrible things, and it's like how do you manage that as a site, which can be challenging. But I love your idea, and it's maybe something I haven't thought enough about, is really getting it more out into true engagement rather than just trying to sort of not unlike what we do on LinkedIn, right? Where I'm not spamming people about my business, I'm having conversations with people, and that's could easily be carried over to the site side. So I'm going to just say I haven't been smart enough to crack that nut yet, but now, I mean, even you saying that has sort of inspired me in a way. So I like that. I love that idea.
Yeah, it's something I've been playing. I'm gonna be playing around. It's been in my head for a while. I just never been able to do it. And ironically enough, everyone's like, "Oh, you're a social media expert." It's only because I've been able to grow my brand. But when I try to do it for a site, I realize that it's gonna have to take others, not just me, to do it. And I'm willing to finally invest actual money into that now. That's
Mhm.
gonna be my next hire.
I agree with you, Dan. And instead of trying to work with Pfizer to make a comic book, you're actually going to go out into the world. And uh, so I think the important part about your strategy is you're literally integrating research into the community. It's not going to be some weird, mysterious veil that people worry about only when they have a terminal illness. You're going to make people more comfortable with research. You're going to go out and talk to the community leaders about it. And so as a result, you're going to pique interest where the patients in the community that we're not getting enrolled right now who are qualified would actually realize they'd know about research, they'd be able to follow it, and they wouldn't be afraid of it. So I think that that is going to be a very good utilization of social media to try to promote research in the community.
I think the reason most sites don't do it, myself included, I'm not pointing any fingers because there's four coming right back at my face. Um, we don't see the immediate ROI. And
Mhm.
we're like, well, it's much easier for me to have this person just help with data entry. than to go out and interview like a preschool teacher. But if I'm willing to invest, like if I think this thesis works, which by the way, I'm cheating because I know it worked for my career. Like I know the answer. Yes, it works. Now, time to do the work. And I remember like my first 3 to 5 years of doing YouTube, really nobody was watching. Like so that's kind of the barrier to entry. I think a lot of people get excited about it, try it for a month, and then they're like, we're over it. You go back to buying dry ice.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's an interesting observation, and maybe it's like a weakness and a strength of what we're doing, and other people like us. There's a lot of people like us that have small community sites or small networks going, and I love that that's a sort of growing approach. But I think the weakness in a way is that you mean Arizona State, everybody already knows who they are. They already have trust to some degree, or at least brand recognition, in the community. But Yuma Clinical Trials, not so much. You got to get out there and hit the streets. But you've also, you know how this is. Like sometimes it's just one conversation at a time, and you or your organization can do that, I think, more effectively than a big place that doesn't really care, but they've got the name. You know what I'm saying? Like, so the opportunity's there, but it's going to be much more of an uphill climb, I guess. But I mean, that's why we do what we do, and we don't work for
Well, it's all about
university.
doing work. It's doing work that others don't want to do, others that are bigger than you. When someone's bigger than you, company or person, they have more to lose. So that becomes their weakness because now they don't want to do things. This is why CROs are, I'm not going to say fail, but this is why they've become less efficient over time. They can't risk. If they make one bad move, they're going to lose a sponsor. Whereas site networks, they can take the risk. So I see a lot of parallels there. We got questions too. You want to go to some of these questions?
Yeah.
How complicated, Mario Sierra, certified clinical research coordinator. It's very valuable to have. How complicated was it to integrate a vaccine study into your sites, assuming no experience?
Man, we didn't do any. We
Neither.
somehow skated through with doing literally none. I know there are some site networks out there that like that's their whole bread and butter are vaccine trials, but we have not. We've not done any, so I have nothing to say.
Have you?
I think that COVID kind of gave everyone a chance to get some experience if they wanted it. And so as a result, a lot of the times we can integrate our vaccine studies into our primary care facilities. So vaccines are really good for primary care if you ever want to do it. And I'd say during COVID, it wasn't hard at all. Now that COVID's over, it's going to go back to the whole PI grooming dynamic that you're going to have to worry about, where you got to make sure that your PIs have a little bit of experience to get them in. But overall, I think the barrier to entry has been reduced slightly since the pandemic.
Yeah, I'm noticing more RSV studies, interestingly enough. And one of them is a vaccine. So we might be doing our first one. Jelena says maybe target college students or sponsor clubs. Yes, to do the community outreach. I think that's going to be my only option in my town. Sorry, Brad, to cover your face. I think it's worth noting a lot of research sites present themselves very poorly publicly, which definitely doesn't promote trust to folks who aren't familiar with the industry. By present, I mean, he means websites and professionalism of first point of contact. I kind of agree. I mean, a lot of these websites, my own included, Yuma Clinical Trial, they look thrown together. I think actually engaging, that's like Web 1.0. I think actually engaging and using these tools better can help in that regard. And I think that's like, if you're going to invest money, it should be invested there when it comes to like patient facing, community facing things, and even sponsor facing. I mean, sponsors will look at a site's, if you're going to talk about, hey, we use social media, they're going to look at your social media and see, are you actually doing something? So I agree.
Well, I think even more basically, like, and I've heard this from sponsors, and especially a lot of insight from smaller sponsors that I've worked with. I mean, a lot of sites don't do the basics well. They don't answer the phone. They don't call their patients back. They don't follow up on leads. that come through, which are like, I mean, it's pretty basic stuff to do. And, you know, I've heard it a crazy amount. You know, we've done or gotten some of the same, you know, central recruitment campaigns, but we've blown big sites out of the water just because we will call a patient back within
Mhm.
a half hour rather than wait 3 days when they're gone and they feel like you've left them behind. You know what I mean? So basic stuff like that, I think too, can have a really big impact on your site.
How do you, because I mean, yeah, I agree. But a lot of sites are also like, okay, well, how do we do that when my coordinators are already
Yep.
overworked? Like, do you just hire someone else and that's it?
Yep. I think that's where you're going to run into, and I've talked about this before, is if we want our sites to be kind of experimental, if they want them to take those risks, they're going to have sufficient fund to think about exploration. If you just have sites that are working on shoestrings all the time and all they can worry about is focusing on survival, they're not going to be able to explore. They're not going to be able to do new things because all they could, like you said, when it comes to taking risks, right? When it comes to taking risks, a site that can just barely make payroll isn't going to make a risk compared to a site with maybe a little bit of a budget. Prime example is, and I think you're kind of on your way to doing this, Dan, is you're going to be essentially hiring a business development rep, a BD rep at a site level BD rep, clinical research liaisons, sometimes they call them that, sometimes. But if you can actually have the resources on your overhead to focus on business development, to focus on exploration of new technologies, I think it's going to be helpful. So if you fund the sites appropriately, my guess is they will be utilizing these technologies more when they have more bandwidth.
And it's up to the sites to make sure that they're being funded appropriately, right? It's not the sponsors.
Exactly.
I've battled with this forever, guys, regarding budgets, right? And I don't know. It's not probably not the same answer. It's every case by case. Do CROs, because oftentimes CROs are negotiating, and sometimes they are just middlemen. Like they're literally asking the sponsor, hey, site asked for this. Do you agree? Sponsor says no. Go back to them. Finally, they come to an agreement. But I suspect there are times when sponsor says, hey, this is what we're going to pay you. And the reason I suspect this because I've done a few CRO projects myself. And that's what sponsors told us. We don't care what you're going to give the site. We're budgeted for you. So you figure out. So oftentimes, is it the CRO that's really the ones negotiating against the sites? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I was at Magi and I did no, it wasn't a panel. It was more of a debate style, and it was me and a CRO contact, and it was about hidden costs for sites. So of course, a lot of budget issues came up, and there were a lot of sponsor people in the crowd. Maybe not a lot, but it became clear to me that there was definitely differences of opinions between sponsor and CRO, and sponsors not even like being like, "Oh, well, we'd be open to that," but they never know it because you're only dealing with the CRO. You know what I mean? So I think your point is pretty valid. I mean, I think there are instances where some of that stuff never gets back to the sponsor, even though the sponsor might be willing and not even just willing, but happy to help pay for some of these things because it would make for, you know, a better experience, better enrollment, better quality, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's where I think there's certainly some gatekeeping that goes on that sponsors may not even know about.
Mm-hmm. And using the sponsor as a convenient scapegoat, say, hey, they won't accept this. Even though they might, they're just not going to ask because it goes against their incentive. So it all boils down. I guess the theme of this so far has been incentives. This entire conversation.
Yep. Yep. Or even the transition of incentives as we try to go into more innovation.
I like that. So incentives have to be shifting. Right now, we're at an inflection point where maybe incentives are. I think it starts with empowering sites first, like awareness. That's why a lot of these conferences are important, right? But we have to keep the true essence of the conference in mind, like site focused. I think that's a key theme
Yes.
that needs to be closely guarded.
Yeah, I think one thing that they said at SCRS, and I've heard this even in our autism nonprofits, is it's always if you're gonna do something for us, it better be with us. In other words, stop talking down to us, stop making decisions without having our feedback. Um, start actually having conferences that sites can afford to attend if you really want to speak on behalf of sites. So I don't know. It's just there's a lot of things that we have to consider when it comes to that for innovation.
It's an interesting decade. I think COVID kind of spearheaded a lot of this awareness, shifting incentives. Like, even if the incentives haven't shifted yet, just the idea. I mean, everything's an idea first. So just the idea that we're formulating now, right, may eventually become a reality later on down the road.
I've so back to the CROs, the budgets, and the gatekeeping. I've seen
You
it
love
on.
that. You love that.
Well, I've seen it on both ways. So, I've heard the stories where sponsors go to CROs and say, here's your limits, high, mid, low. If you're within this range, fine, you don't have to talk to us. But then if you get above this range, then you're going to have to escalate it and send it our way. That's when you get the crazy, I'm waiting on the sponsor to return the approval kind of a delay. But then I also hear from the sponsors saying, this is a giant waste of our time. We never told them that. I don't know what they were thinking. We're wasting weeks and months of time. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's just dependent on the CRO and the sponsor and their combinations.
How do we know? Like, if it, like, how do you just ask? Because I'm in the situation now. I'm not going to name names, but it's a huge sponsor. It's a phase 4 study. So it's like, but it's actually a decent budget phase 4 study. So I'm actually excited about it. And it's a big CRO in the middle. And the CRO, I mean, they finally agreed to our terms, but it took months and we still don't have the executed contract. And I try to piece things together. I didn't ask the guy from the CRO who we're negotiating with, like, hey, is the sponsor actually telling you this? Because that would be like, it would basically show him I have no trust for him. And how is that going to help me? But I pieced together things. I asked the CRA things when she came to SIV. I said, hey, why is this budget taking so long? She said, oh, that's the way this study is. The sponsor's in a rush to wait. So then I thought, okay, maybe it actually is the sponsor. So I just started like piecing things together outside of just straight up asking, like, how do you guys ascertain, is the issue here with this particular budget the CRO or the sponsor?
Well, I mean, that's part of the problem, right? Is the opacity. I mean, there's no transparency to sites. It's what the hell's going on. And, I'll say this, I don't negotiate the budgets directly anymore. I have someone who does it because they're way more aggressive at it than I am. But they will ask, and they will, I mean, honestly, just by asking and make friends with your person you're negotiating with, they'll tell you stuff you would never have guessed. They'll even tell you how to get more money sometimes if you really make friends with them. You know what I mean? I say make friends, but I mean pick up the phone, call them. Don't just exchange emails. Ask probing questions. Yeah, right. Ask probing questions. You'll be surprised by how much they will tell you. But I also think it's just a shame that's what you have to do to even know what the hell's going on. Because to your point, it's like you're being a private investigator, like trying to put together like who's calling the shots here and why are things happening in such a crazy and bizarre way. And it's weird that we have to do that.
Going back to the scientist in me, that's a really interesting question, and it's something that's part of my metrics. So I can tell you that from site's point of view, generally the average time in the industry is a 1-to-3 ratio for a return to contracts. In other words, for every 1 day that contract is at your site, you're going to be waiting for 3 days. And the larger the CRO and the larger the sponsor, the greater that ratio. For example, some of the big global sponsors that you're going to run into, you're probably looking at more of a 1-to-5 ratio, which means if you go through 2 to 3 rounds of negotiation, you're looking at least 15 to 20 business days just to try to get something returned.
Yeah, that's about on par with what I've experienced. And this is an important study for us because it's a huge indication. I mean, we can enroll like a lot of people in Yuma with this condition. And it's relatively easy study for my relatively new PI. So I was worried that I over negotiated and that the sponsor's just gonna stall because they canceled our SIV. So I was like, oh, geez. But then we ended up having our SIV later. So I went back to, okay, it's probably just the sponsor being slow. Anyways, just an example of what sites have to deal with, guys. Let's get some of these questions, all right? Abby, speaking of Veeva, hey, Abby. Nelson Ruttrick. I met this guy and I talked to him on Clubhouse before too. Does a lot on social media to get patients. He may have tips to share. Community outreach combined with highly targeted posts could be powerful. I haven't studied what Nelson actually does. Have one of you guys? Are you guys aware?
I've got Nelson's coming on my live stream Thursday to talk. So yeah, no, I know that he definitely is very successful. From my understanding, he does like few trials, but does them extremely well and extremely well targeted. It sounds like. So I don't have a lot of specifics, but tune in on Thursday to learn more.
There you go. What about you, Dr. Fox? Do you know Nelson?
I only know Nelson from every single podcast I've been with Brad. He's always seemed to be there asking the questions and being very innovative. So
Very
I can't wait to
engaged
hear
with
that, Brad. That'll be good.
When Clubhouse was a thing, I used to be on there with him, and he's like a wealth of information. Perla Nunez, how's it going? Hey, yes, community engagement and outreach works, but you have to put time into it and watch the fruits grow. Absolutely, and myself included. Sorry, Brad, I don't know how you got on the bottom, man. It's because you showed up last. That's why. That's okay. We've worked on. This is funny because it's covered Brad. Okay, we've worked on community engagement for the last 2 years or so in Nashville. ROI not immediate. Lots of new allies. Yes, I agree. Here's people engaging with each other. This is one of the things I love about the platforms. Commenters engaging with each other. Like, you can even get good candidates if you're looking for somebody. Just on YouTube comments, LinkedIn comments, myself, Brad, Dr. Fox. I mean, this is like, if you're looking for opportunities, you need to be in people's comments sections. Okay. Good afternoon. CRO says no. Sponsor says go. That's a new t-shirt. Maybe it's a new t-shirt. All right, Brad, you're going to get covered again. Sorry, but let's read Bianca's question real quick. If you have IQVIA studies that have clinical trial educators, let them help you. As a CTE, I have to beg some sites to let me do community outreach for them, do lunch and learns with their staff. CTEs are free to sites, and our primary job is to help sites recruit and enroll. We will do anything the site needs to help, and sadly, sites don't take advantage. They don't even want us to visit them. They refuse free lunches. So yeah, I can see that, and I know I've worked with a few CTE. What do you guys think about that? Why do sites refuse these people?
I mean, I love that idea, but I also get the notion from sites that like everyone who approaches you is like a pain in the ass, right? I mean, it's just more to deal with. You got to, bother your PI or bother people in a clinic, and that can be, oftentimes research is relegated to like the bottom of the pile in whatever institution they're in, and it's like, so I think there's like just sort of a overarching feeling of like, I don't want to bother anybody. I just want to do the bare minimum and try to get everything, done as well as I can. But I know we worked on a trial a couple of years ago that did have a CTE like that. And it's very useful again. And this is where I think people who are a little bit more progressive or forward thinking will take advantage of those opportunities, and they will help. But I know in places I've worked, it's just, again, no one wants to engage any more than they have to, because everything turns into more work somehow. and again, sites are strapped. They don't have the throughput to do that, even though the irony is it could help them in spades, Mm-hmm. So it's a weird conundrum.
Yep. So same here. It's, for us, it's kind of like time is money, and it's kind of like that catch-22 where I know CTEs are here to help. They're here to try to do things and help the sites. But at the same time, it's important to know that if you have, 60 CTEs trying to get your PI's time, he's never going to get to run clinic again. So, between the CTEs and the MSLs and everyone else who just wants a moment of your time, we actually had an SIV where they wanted the PI to sit there for 3 full days of giving up clinic for this trial. Yeah, it's crazy. So
that ain't happening.
Yeah, and that's exactly what doesn't happen, is we just say no thank you, because we really don't have the bandwidth to accommodate that kind of a thing. And although it's free lunches, keep in mind that's also hours we have to pay our coordinators that we're not getting paid for.
Exactly right. I think that last part is what I was going to add to Bianca's comment. Like, I agree. We've had CTs in the past. They are helpful. IQVIA seems to be the ones that are hiring them. But most sites have overworked CRCs. So it boils down again, you just need more personnel. Like, I think sites actually need more personnel than they think. And over hiring, I mean, it's dangerous because look, let's be honest as site owners, right? Like, we hire someone else, it's coming out of our immediate profit, even though we might have greater profit in the future. It's uncertain, and uncertainty right now is the name of the game in our economy. So I totally see why. So Bianca, I agree with you, but it's not that simple because a lot of these site owners and management are thinking short term when they really should be thinking long term. Because, like, as I was reading that comment from Bianca, I'm thinking, all right, this person I hire that's going to do social media and all that, they're going to meet with the CTs. And if my PI is busy, guess what? I'm going to tell the CT, we're happy to spend all day with you. I have a dedicated person just for you, but my PI is not going to see you. I think that's like a fair trade-off.
Well, look at in healthcare. Look at what happened with MSLs. You're looking at the exact same behavior.
Mm.
So when MSLs enter healthcare and enter the clinics, what's the very first thing they want to do? They have a direct accountability to mark how many doctors they talk to. And so we literally have to go through there to protect our doctors' time so they can focus on their clinics
Oh,
to
yeah.
try to, we have to vet these MSLs appropriately. And they hate it. They absolutely hate it because that's not how their success is talking to the doctors. And we're like, no, we got to protect their time. Sorry.
Yeah, they just
Exactly.
want to. Nope, they want to show somebody a slide deck real bad.
Yeah.
And sign a log. Like, we need one more log to sign. And even the sales reps have logs. So you're right. And this goes even more complicated. Like, not everything, like, there's maybe like simple explanations, but like complex reasons behind why. So my PI, I've been doing the human clinical trials for just a little over a year. He's been really cool. I've paid him very little so far. Right. So when I hire somebody, I have to explain to him, hey, we're delaying our profits a little more, but here's my rationale. And then I have to be careful about his time as well, because it's enough that he's got to meet with monitors now, and he's not really getting paid because he's now like a partner. So he's getting paid when I get paid.
Mhm.
And he bought into it, but other sites might be dealing with PIs that are not so like easy to convince. Hey, meet with this monitor. She says an hour, but hey, just give her 10 minutes. Right? Well, how much of that can you do and then add on CTEs and all this other nonsense in addition to what they have until they start thinking time is money for me too? Forget about Dan. This is my practice. Like, time is money for me too. So it's complex. It's not as simple as what IQVIA says, hey, here's a solution. One size fits all. Unfortunately, it's not how it works.
Yeah, man, we deal with that. It's challenging because I mean, a lot of the deal with most of our PIs is, look, you're going to get paid when we get paid. Understand that's going to be, and that's going to be quarterly. Fingers crossed, but
I forgot to mention that. What if it's like 4 months behind on payment?
I mean, sometimes that's the case, and frankly, to your point, you have to be really careful about what you ask from that physician when it's been 3 months and they haven't seen a lick of money come through because you're waiting to get paid, and you can't front them thousands of dollars necessarily because you're trying to make payroll in the meantime. So the whole thing, like you said, it's simple, but it's complex at the same time. I mean, it's those little nuances aren't always clear. So it has so many downstream effects. Just to go back to, again, something as simple as quarterly payments, which we know aren't quarterly anyway, but that rolls down into all kinds of other subtle, relationship based problems that come up along the way. So yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot to deal with.
Yep. And it all goes back to, if you want sites to grow, you have to feed them. Starving sites aren't going to want to do all the stuff you want them to do. So
Starving site. Yeah, that's right. That for sure not. But do you want the sites? You still want the sites to be somewhat hungry, right? We don't want them to be fat.
I think they're pretty emaciated right now. I don't think you have to worry about that. we need sites to get a living wage. We need sites to have
Yeah.
the money that they need to do all of this, and it's just not happening.
And you would think that it would, because right now the markets in our favor are being sites. Like there's just a huge supply of studies. You could be picky. Like I'm a startup site and I'm turning down studies. Never
Yep.
would have imagined this like in 2005.
Yep.
Well, and
Uh,
something that occurred to me, someone else I talked to at Magi, and I've had this observation too. You can tell me if I'm off base here, but like his observation was that look, 80-90% of the trials we get are sort of, they kick along and they're fine, but they're not big money makers necessarily, right? But then the whole point is to be in the game and to be honing your processes so that when those 10 to 20% come along that you just destroy, and they basically let you level up so that you can, then bolster yourself and then become, even more efficient in what you do, have more positions in place to help support continued growth. But, the hard part is like the grind of those, 80% that aren't really doing much for you, right? Like you'll get a few, they'll do okay, but you're not really, you're not laughing all the way to the bank off of those. You're just kind of keeping the doors open.
yep.
And I think that creates a really interesting, because that could be 3 months or it could be 2 years of you grinding along, waiting for those big opportunities to come. But you've got to use that opportunity to get everything in place. So I don't know. That's interesting dynamic for sites. And I don't know if that's unique or if you guys kind of have the same experience or I mean, how does that jive?
Same.
Yep. Yep.
I would take it a step further, and this is an unorthodox statement to make. Sometimes you have to be willing to even burn a bridge to take advantage of those opportunities. I mean, we're dealing with like finite resources, right? Especially as a startup site. So I had there's an example of this study. It's virtually impossible to enroll. We've had 5 screen failures. We've essentially given up on it because we have better studies now, and we're like, why would I go through all this work? Like I didn't even train my new CRCs on that old study. It's in hindsight, I would have never taken that study, but it was my first study I had, so I took it. And I know I'm burning a bridge by not enrolling. Luckily for me, this is an issue with both sites on that study, so I'm not necessarily like a huge outlier, but I'm still like probably never going to be used by that CRO again. It's a small CRO, small sponsor. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I would take it a step further. Like sometimes you actually burn some ships, to get to where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So we only have theoretically 12 minutes. Did we want to talk about
12
patients? And
minutes.
I know
Holy
we've
crap.
talked. So did you want to talk about patient centricity at all?
I'm down for it. Like, look at these comments. We can do both. Like, let's do
Yeah.
patient centricity. Let's do comments. Um, Tying in patient centricity to Viva. Viva's trying to do ePro as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they understand this too. Not to harp on Viva too much, but you know how they had to be subtly integrated into this conversation, just like the social media. When you're talking about community engagement and patients, you subtly introduce the idea of research when you're interviewing a high school teacher about something for your local podcast. So yeah, what do you think? Like, what does that mean to you guys? Patient centricity.
Go ahead, Dr. Fox.
Oh boy. So for me, I had a very interesting experience just last week about patient centricity. And for me, it seems like a simple word, right? Patient centricity, the center of your focus, which is interesting. But then you start to look at the industry where it was kind of a buzzword for a while during COVID. It's all about the patients. We're here to serve the patients. We want everything to come to them. And then you start to pull back the veils and you hear the same exact things you have been for years, where it's, if this patient doesn't do what I want them to, then they're of no use to me. They're no good to me. It's almost like it feels like we say this thing on one end just to make the public happy, But then once we start to really look at it, when we talk about enrollment goals, when we treat patients like some kind of a product, when we devalue them for the efforts that they do when they're, quote, no good to you, it's kind of concerning in many different ways. And so as a result, for me, patient centricity is just that. We're literally here to serve the patients. And then whatever happens afterward is a positive consequence of that. But most importantly is they're our number one reason for being here.
Yeah.
No, it's true. And, patient centricity is kind of like, it's in the kind of the same box as like DCT for me. I've just given up on trying to define it or even consider it. I mean, I just, not that I don't consider patient centricity, but I mean, I can sort of appreciate the hard line to walk between being patient centric, but also still doing rigorous science, which is really, I mean, it's what we're doing. We're doing data collection. We're basically glorified data collectors in a lot of ways, right? And balancing that with being, again, like centered on the patient, I can appreciate how that can be challenging at times. But I mean, the best thing I can do is just be a freaking human being, to the patients that I engage with. I mean, I can't make the study better. I can't make the inclusion criteria, more broad. I can't give them something better than the crappy ERT phone that, they have to do ePro on. I can't
Wow.
change that. I mean, I just can't. So, but what I can do is be a human. I can listen to them. I can try to help them in any way that I can. I can, try to lessen the burden of their participation in different ways by being flexible with when we can see them or getting them a ride to the clinic and paying them the same day that they come in. I mean, the little things, sort of like that. And I mean, that's it. I feel like for us, that's to a large degree the best we can do. And maybe that's, I mean, in a lot of ways, that is good enough. If you build these relationships, they get to like you. They want to come see you. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. But from a higher perspective, I don't know. I mean, when I hear a corporation say patient centricity, I keep scrolling. It doesn't really mean much to me. And
When you hear these like $1 million words, you got to distill them to like what they actually mean. What it actually means to me, when I actually I still deal with the patients. I'm in training mode with my CRCs. So I have like 3 examples of patient centricity that you're not going to get from Pfizer or IQVIA, like, when they sell their next project. We had a patient, first of all, like you said, Dr. Fox, I think you said it's just a patient. They're no good to us anymore. A lot of our screen failures from other studies for other conditions, the fact that they screen failed there is the fact that they're a good candidate for another study.
Yep.
So that's never the case. They're no good to you. Let's say you can't put them in another study. They know people. All right. Patients have friends. Patients, like, hear me out, pharma. They actually have lives, like, outside of your ePro, right? They exist. They're not just a number. That's number 1. Number 2, this was a teachable moment for my new CRC just last month. She got super busy because, like I said, we burned a bridge and now we're like all in on one study. Super busy. A patient had to be screen failed. Oh, well, that sucks. Please screen fail her. She did. ePro stopped. The next day, the patient texts me, "Hey, I can't do my diary.
Oh
What's going on?"
no.
So I told my CRC, I said, "Look, I apologize. Like, this is you. Somebody should have let you know day of." So I had a 20-minute conversation with my coordinator, like, and she's new. It's my fault because I didn't tell her. You can't do this. First of all, this patient could be a good patient for another study. We don't want her having a bad experience. Number 2, she can refer people to us. We don't want her having a bad experience. And number 3 is just like a decent thing to do. And I know you got busy, and I know it's my fault. And in the future, if you're busy, let me know that you're not going to do it so I can do it. She understood, but it took like 20 minutes for me to explain this to her. Another example is these ePros. Like, we have people, there's an elderly group of patients in one of our studies. They're given like these apps on their phones. I know from experience with my mom, they have a hard time closing apps. And these apps, you guys know, they're glitchy as hell.
Yep.
So it helps to close them all out once in a while. Well, this patient came in. I knew what the problem was. So I said, look, come in. I'm going to teach you how to do it properly. And I told her, this square, push it, clear all, open the app back. It will work. It's just that little thing. You know, those things are patient centric to me. Buying someone a sandwich when they're fasting if they're diabetic, or even if they're not diabetic. Maybe they're hungry. They're a human being. Those things are patient centricity, not what I'm hearing on LinkedIn.
Yep. And for me, it goes back to being a service model. We are here to serve the patients, and the results are a consequence of that. But we want to make sure they have the best possible experience. We've had coordinators travel hours to get a sample from a patient who couldn't go somewhere. We've had entire situations where a patient was going through a crisis, and we would try to everything we could to reschedule for them so they could try to do it. We had patients who would relapse, and so we had to literally fit an entire trial around them. It's literally trying to serve that patient. And if you serve the patient, if you serve them properly, you're going to get better data, you're going to get better results, and you're going to have better science.
And you're going to have more patients too.
And you're going to have
It's
more
amazing.
patients.
Once you start randomizing patients, I tell my coordinator, I don't know why, but it's like a rule. Once you get some momentum, you know, word of mouth spreads and they start referring people. And pretty soon, like even if like 1 out of 4 make it, they're referring people. We just want to keep them like this good experience going.
Mm-hmm.
So that's patient centricity, like in a most practical way I can explain it to sites. I still don't think sponsors will get it, but it's okay. Do you guys still have a little more time to get through some of these comments?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. There's a bunch. Jeez.
Appreciate the viewership. Welcome,
Yes.
everyone. Thanks for watching.
Like, subscribe, comment, share. If you don't follow Dr. Daniel Fox and Brad Hightower, I mean, first of all, why? I have to question, like, what's going on with you? Okay, here we go. Ellis, I don't think incentives are as darkly misaligned so much as there is so much friction to just facilitate communication. Yeah, I mean, but how do we know? How do we know? Because, like, who knows all this? Like, sponsors usually know sponsor things. CROs usually know CRO. Sites usually know site things. It's very rare you have somebody that, like, knows all stakeholders well. So how do we know?
I mean, should there be some kind of new collaboration? I mean, is there a place for some kind of working group or something where there, I mean, or is that even useful? Because I mean, I have the same experience. I mean, it's,
Well, with all these freaking conferences, you would think this would be discussed.
yeah, but I mean, what are those conferences for?
They're for the thought leaders to go and get their their micro moments out.
Maybe it's time for a new kind of conference, you know?
You know,
Interesting.
Interesting times we're in. Okay. First time I hear, okay, let's see. Maybe implementing international logo or certification that is shown at the entrance of each research site and promote clinical research in general to the public. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just, it's so fragmented. I don't think you can't get people to agree on. I know it seems simple, like put a logo on your door. Trust me, it's not that simple. And then to get patients to understand what that logo means, forget it. Like, I think it's local grassroots. Oh man, we're behind on these Okay. Often sponsors have empowered the CRO to reduce internal oversight and management time, but if the CRO isn't representing the best interests of the sponsor, though they may think they are, the sites get the short end of the deal. The CRO, by definition, is looking out for themselves.
Wow, super duper. I like that one.
Well, I mean, so that basically like validates the idea that like CROs would screw sites over because they're incentivized to do so, right?
Yeah. Or they're incentivized to not do so.
Or maybe CROs,
thing.
maybe the CROs are underbidding so much because it's so competitive that they pretty much cut everyone's throat. So they're kind of miscommunicating the funding requirements of a trial. And so then sites get screwed. They don't get paid enough, and CROs are strapped because they're just not communicating appropriately.
Rod Raphael, I love this guy. Everybody go follow Rod.
Yes,
Indianapolis, Indiana. Monthly is a lie. That's right. That could be a T-shirt.
Mhm.
Is it Yuma and Viva acquisition? Our market cap compared to Viva's is like, I mean, we don't. Yeah, come on. That's no, not yet, not yet. Give me 5 years though. Uh, what was the quote Dan said for sudden increase in clinical trials?
Revenge research. It was revenge research.
I like that. Brad seeks no one. Not sure. That could be taken out of context. So this was probably 20 minutes ago. I'm behind on these comments.
It's all right.
I work for a sponsor and we have a study coordinator site steering committee to discuss these topics.
I mean, I don't know. Are you guys? I mean, I feel like I'm being asked to be on a lot more like advisory type calls with both vendors and a few sponsors here and there. I mean, I guess that's a good sign, right? I mean, it remains to be seen if that's going to actually amount to much, but at least there's some intention. I mean, is that? Are you guys more cynical? Are you guys somehow even more cynical than I am?
I mean, I've sat on a lot of these and I've been invited to them, and I actually did it for a while. And then all of a sudden I started saying things that were true, and then I was dismissed. I was asked not to come back. So it's like, it's almost like, look, we invited these sites to this committee, and then when they start to speak up, we let them go because we don't like hearing what they have to say. So, I mean, we'll see.
I think you need the site owners on these things, not the coordinators. Unless the coordinator is the owner. I think a lot of the issues, the inefficiencies at the site levels come from management. Like, I mean, sites are not without blame in a lot of this stuff.
That's right.
We're all
That's
about
true.
empowering sites, but I mean, come on, not every site's built the same.
Yep.
Some sites I know, terrible. The most toxic people I've ever met have been some other site owners that I will remain nameless. But I don't know who would work for them, and not many people do for a long time. So I don't know if the coordinator is necessarily maybe from an operational standpoint, but from more of a philosophical, what are the problems with sites and patient centricity and all this stuff. I don't know if the coordinator necessarily the one to bring to the table here. Mm-hmm. And the reason they get you, Brad, is because you're on LinkedIn and they don't want you talking crap about them, man. So they're like, oh, let's get Brad on our calls first.
Keep your enemies close, I guess. Yeah. Well, I mean, but I think, too, and not unlike you guys, we are, I'm still seeing patients. I run all this stuff, but I'm also still seeing patients every day too. We're more of the true generalists. I know that's a big thing for you, Dan, that
I love it.
Is important, but a lot of sites don't run that way. A lot of sites, the coordinator does one little cog in the machine, and they don't have a great understanding of the bigger picture. And then on the opposite side, you've got these big, new, well-funded IROs that have C-suites that are bigger than our entire companies, who don't know jack shit about actually what life on the ground is either. And so they misrepresent the site experience as well in a lot of ways. So it's hard to find that, I guess, that good balance,
Good.
I think this steering committee would be good for the actual study. If you get the coordinator for the actual study and not just some hypothetical study in the future. First of all, if coordinators are as overworked as we say they are, which they are, who's going to have time for this? They don't even have time to return patients' calls. Who's going to have time? The only people who are going to have time are people like me or Brad or Dr. Fox, or people who can delegate things. I mean, I don't know. It's definitely a good attempt, but I don't know how practical actually is going to be. Hate to sound like a pessimist. I liked your idea about newsletters though, and having a podcast newsletter too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was your idea.
It's a good idea.
Podcast newsletter. There's something, again, more engaging, because I know a lot of us don't want to sit, and I'm guilty too. I don't want to sit through all the calls always. But if I could watch, do a short podcast or do a short video, interview with some of the other sites, so we can hear. Because I look at those things. Who's on top? Okay, well, what are they doing? What are they doing that I'm not doing? Maybe I'm missing something simple that I'm just not seeing. So let's get me in touch with them, or let us all learn from these successful sites.
Have you ever reached out to a site that's high enroller and They've actually responded back to you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That has happened, and sometimes we've been the site that people have reached out to us. But I've also had it happen where you get ghosted by them, or they don't. Again, same problem. They don't want to. Maybe there's too much.
Yeah,
There's like a whole scarcity thing, right? Like, oh, I
I
can't
can't
tell
help
them.
you be good because then like I'm less good.
Yeah, because
Right,
then I lose out on money. I lose out on money because I help you. It's like that's
Yeah.
just a mentality we got to get rid of.
If you
There's
close the
always
gap from my number 1 to your number 2,
yeah.
and I'm helping you do that, I look less good to the
Mhm.
sponsor. That's like this
Yeah.
mentality, right?
Yeah, and it's not, oh, look, I can open up another trial because we're done with this one, that's what we should be thinking
That's
about.
what we should be doing. If it's truly like abundance, which we actually are.
Yeah.
Rod Raphael, I have said since COVID started, the best time to promote research to the public has never had this much awareness in our lifetime about research. Exactly. Karen, I'm confused. I noticed a lot of excuses and issues. What is it that you really want to make things great for you and your sites? Nobody's speaking what they want. Most sites just agree to contracts and budgets and never say I have to pay my staff and I need a better pay schedule. Is it fear that you will not be selected or be blacklisted because you speak your truth? Just asking. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of fears in that, Karen, and that's the goal. Is we would really want to make sure that the sites that we work with and for are successful, and that means making sure that they get paid what it takes to do the trial, not just getting paid whatever they're given.
Well,
if we
and
can,
if I
go
can,
ahead,
dude,
bro.
I've noticed a lot of people lately saying, "Oh, well, sites are just complaining. They're not doing anything about it." And I want to be like, "Look, man. First of all, I mean, it's even kind of in her comment here. Most sites just agree to contracts and budgets. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And you know why? Is because of lack. Part of it's a lack of awareness too, right? Like, I mean, I can't tell you sites I met and have talked to who don't realize that they have leverage to negotiate those things so that they can pay their staff and get a better pay schedule. And whether that be fear or just complete lack of education, I mean, part of it, I think we all are trying in our own ways to make that more apparent to sites that are out there because, again, if we can raise the floor for everyone, we can all get a little bit better. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to point out the problems that exist in terms of educating everybody about the problems. It's not just complaining for the sake of complaining. We're all out there putting our money where our mouth is, running these sites. It's not just complaining for the sake of it. I mean, our livelihoods depend on this. We are not. You couldn't be any more invested in wanting a solution than we are. So, I just that annoys me too. That again, it's like, well, you guys are everyone's just complaining, and like, I don't. Well, that's not it though. I mean, I think there's so much more that we need to do, and part of that is exposing the problems that do exist. I think that's a perfectly fair thing to do.
Yeah, and Brad, I think also the word complain is a very interesting word. That means that you're pretty much just griping and you're not really doing anything about it. You're griping just to gripe. And I think that everyone on this podcast right now has successfully documented their observations and their concerns, and then as a result, they're justifying their actions. That's not complaining.
Fair.
Yeah, there's a lot I could say on that too. I mean, I just basically we need to normalize being able to talk transparently.
That's
And
it.
we, in some respect, I mean, you guys are leading the front on that. Like, and it may seem like you're always complaining, but that's kind of like also what works well to get a lot of feedback. Like to give you more feedback for the feedback loop is like expose a problem. Like a lot of your posts, Brad, the reason they do well is because you're basically bitching about something. It's got a catchy hook, but then there's like a lesson in there, and the more catchy it is, the more people are gonna provide that feedback.
Well, and that's just it too, though. I want people to understand, like, you're not going to get blacklisted just because you want what you deserve or you want your value. You know what I
Have you
mean?
been?
Like,
You're proof that you can't be blacklisted. You're proof.
well, we'll see. We'll see. Let's not speak
Oh
too
shoot!
soon. But
Let's
to
end this
her point,
broadcast.
to her point, I do think there is that fear that a lot of sites have. Like, I just got to take what's handed to me. I better not ask too many questions or cause too many problems because they'll just move on to the site down the street. And that doesn't have to be that way. It's okay to make your issues known, and then we can start working on some solutions together from there. So, I mean, again, that's That's part of the hope too, to know you have that ability.
Yeah. And I always tell them, I tell the sponsors straight up, I said, look, I'm not doing you a favor by accepting an underfunded budget. It's not fair to the patient. It's not fair to my site. It's not even fair to your sponsor and your technology. So if you want this done properly, I recommend you put the appropriate resources toward it.
What
And
do they
that,
usually tell you when you say that?
well, if I tell the sponsor, they said, wow, I really appreciate your passion, your dedication to my project. If I tell the CRO, they said, well, we have our orders, we have to escalate. So, you choose your battles.
I like that. Okay. Almost done here, guys. Thank you for your patience. I've worked for several years in DCT side. Hate that word. Interfacing directly with sponsors and CROs, and now I'm on the sponsor side. I noticed a lot of disconnect in communication between the three groups when I was on the site side, which comes with involving a middle person, but it's been encouraging to see that there's a considered effort to improve the direct relations between sponsors and sites.
It's good to know, Patrick. It's good to know. Let's keep that up. If you're on the sponsor side, just keep giving them our direct numbers. We can't get veiled. We can't get undermined. We've got to be able to have that direct connection so we can have a dedication to the quality. We're both here for the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I started in 2005, it was so secretive, this industry. I remember my monitor kept telling me about a competitor site in the same town. They were doing really well on a study, and she kept telling me to talk to them. I was like, all right, they're not going to do it. And so finally she called their coordinator and said, hey, here's the coordinator here. Talk to him a little bit. It was like she had to force this dialogue. And I think now in 2022, 2023, we don't really have to force it. We got people like Brad and Dr. Fox and myself to some extent, kind of enabling these conversations. So it's not really forced. And that's kind of one of the benefits of social media. There's a lot of negatives with social media too, but that's one of the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last one. We've actually had great success with the steering committee. The coordinator assigned to the study is paid a contractor fee to participate. All right. We asked them to be honest and work through our issues. We were able to get an extra $400,000 approved by our management team to assist with site issues.
Nice.
Good job, Carly. Thank you.
Hats off to you, because that's done the right way. And I think so too. Anything else, guys? We wrap up. We'll do first of many.
Yeah, I think we
anything
need
we
to make
didn't
this
talk about?
regular.
Yeah, we do a regular.
Maybe even you could ask for pre-questions if someone they want to ask questions before live, so we have a little bit of a list that we can follow off of to start with.
Little icebreaker to get going. Yeah, I think so. All right, so we covered everything. Patient centricity. Oh, virtual trials is dead, right? Nobody's talking about that anymore.
I don't even know where to start.
Do you guys hear that? I don't hear virtual trials anymore. I hear DCT. They given up on that.
Yeah. I feel like that's been DCT is now the stamp on everything.
But you really have to ask. You have to ask yourself why that happened, and that's where you really got to get into another podcast to do it.
Yeah, there's always more, guys. Stay tuned. Well, thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you, Brad. Where you can find us again, Australian Flag Girl. Brad is on LinkedIn. Same with Dr. Fox. Their LinkedIn profiles will be underneath the show notes. So that's where you can find them. Thank you so much. Everybody like, subscribe, comment, share. We'll do it again soon, guys. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.